usual, give it another couple of minutes before we get underway here to just give more folks a chance to join. Thank you. Okay, so it looks like we have a number of folks who have joined and more are trickling in now. So this is a good chance to get underway in earnest. So again, good afternoon and welcome everybody to this NYSERDA Distributed Energy Storage webinar. My name is Shyam Mehta. I am a director at NYSERDA, part of our Integrated Energy Solutions team, which contains our Distributed Energy Storage Program team, which is what this webinar is about today. And I'm joined by my colleagues, John Petinos, who manages our retail energy storage program, and Jasmine Lim, who runs our residential energy storage program, and they will be doing the bulk of the presenting for today. But before I hand them over the mic, just want to make some introductory remarks. So as the title indicates, the focus of today's webinar is to cover a number of updates that have been made to the residential retail energy storage program manual. Most prominently, the inclusion of the rules and requirements for the inclusive storage incentives, both the residential and retail versions of that. But then in addition to that, there are a number of other smaller changes, smaller but still important changes to the program manual and the existing rules for both the residential and retail energy storage programs, which we'll be going over today. So if we can just go to the next slide for a few housekeeping notes before we get started. So just a couple of reminders. So we are recording today's webinar, and a copy of the slides will be posted to NYSERDA's energy storage page in the webinar presentation section. I should say NYSERDA's residential and retail energy storage page, because there's multiple storage program offerings at NYSERDA currently. You will be muted upon entry to the webinar, but you will be able to submit questions through the Slido Q&A feature that you should be able to see on your WebEx console at any time during the webinar. So please feel free to start typing questions as they come to mind. We will be compiling them, triaging them, and then trying to answer as many as we can at the end of the presentation. And if we don't get to any during this presentation, we will reach out with responses by email. Next slide. Sorry, one more housekeeping item as was noted on the last slide. If there's any technical issues, you can again bring them up through the Slido Q&A chat. If you're having issues with the Slido Q&A chat, then please just directly email our energy storage inbox at energystorage@nyserda.ny.gov. Thank you. So just a quick run through regarding the agenda before we get underway. So we'll start with by talking about and clarifying updates to contractor requirements as concerns the application process and requirements for application as a participating contractor. So again, this is not with regard to project applications. This is with regard to applying to become a participating contractor for the either or both of the residential and retail energy storage programs before you can even begin to submit incentives. After that, Jasmine will go through updates to the residential energy storage incentive program from the new updated manual. John will be doing the same after that when it comes to the retail energy storage program. And then Jasmine will again grab the mic to present the final rules and requirements as housed in the current program manual as concerns the inclusive storage incentives. And the hope is that we will leave at least half an hour or around about that after the verbal presentation for Q&A. So with that, I think the next section is updates to contractor requirements. So I'll be passing things over to my colleagues to take us away with that. So thank you.
Thank you, Shyam. Next slide, please. Hi, everyone. My name is Jasmine Lim. As Shyam mentioned, I manage the Residential Energy Storage Incentive Program, and I'll be kicking off the first section of the webinar today. But just a quick comment on the latest program manual version. So this is an update to the existing program manual that was published at our program launch last summer, 2025. But on the first page of the latest program manual, which was published on Tuesday, April 7th last week, you'll see this revision table that includes all of the sections that were updated and a description of the changes. So we structured today's presentation to follow this same order in the table. So you'll notice in all of the headings today, the section numbers are included for your reference. And the program manual will be updated in the future with webinars to follow whenever we make another major update. So this is the first of these webinars. Next slide, please. So as mentioned, the first section is concerning updates to the contractor requirements. Once again, these are the contractor requirements for both the residential and retail programs. Next slide, please. So we've made some updates to the contractor references section. We've made a couple of allowances and we've made a couple of clarifications after observing the first few months of the program. So it remains true that to participate in the residential program, contractor applicants need to submit 3 references for completed projects, but the new thing here is that applicants will be approved as contractors upon 2 complete reference checks. So if your 3rd reference doesn't get back to us, that's okay, as long as we have 2 complete reference checks. For the retail program, also need to submit 3 references for 3 projects, each greater than 600 kilowatt hours in nameplate capacity that entered operation in the last 3 years, and that sum up to at least 3 megawatts. But the new thing here is that on a case-by-case basis, we may consider references that were completed more than 3 years before your date of application. As a reminder, references should include the name, address, phone, and email contact for each project reference, the system size of the project, interconnection date, your role as a contractor in the project, and construction photos. We have further details in the contractor application document checklist that's available on our website. And one last tip for success here, we advise that all contractors alert their references that NYSERDA will be reaching out to increase the response rate. Next slide, please. So 2 clarifications on the existing reference rules. Project references cannot be provided by an owner or employee of the applicant's company or related company, cannot be provided by a relative of an owner or employee, and cannot be provided by any other related company. We also clarify that if applying to both the residential and retail programs, contractor applicants have to provide 6 references in total. Finally, an example of the reference form that is sent by NYSERDA to customers can be found on our website. Next slide, please. We also added some clarifications on the DPS Distributed Energy Resource Letter requirement. So as before, applicants need to comply with DPS's regulations for DER providers. We've included some additional information from John Shevers at DPS, who handles DER provider registration. He especially advises everyone to read the Uniform Business Practices for Distributed Energy Resource Suppliers, or UBPDRs, because DPS registration can take up to 30 days, and oftentimes the holdups with application to that are based on details of the UBPDRs that were missed by applicants. So for NYSERDA's requirements here, applicants that contract directly with customers, such as everyone in the residential program, has to provide a DER provider approval letter from DPS. Applicants that do not contract directly with customers, so for most of the retail program, must provide a DER provider registration determination letter from DPS, stating that you're not required to register as a DER provider. The new part here is that we have granted a 90-day grace period if applicants cannot provide a DPS letter, but they can provide proof of submission to DPS for an application. So this means that you can be approved as a provisional contractor, but after 90 days of that status, if you have not provided the DPS letter that's appropriate, you will have to be moved to suspended status by our program, and you will not be able to submit projects until you provide the DPS letter. Next slide, please. So ending off the contractor requirements section with some other common application rejection issues. So one document that's often rejected is the certificate of insurance. We have a sample on our website. As you can see here, there's a link that will be shared in our slides. We oftentimes see that this does not include workers' compensation or disability, but both of these are required for New York State. Another document that's often rejected is the sample customer agreement. We have details on all the elements you need to include in our contractor application document checklist, which is available on our website. But these things often include installation location address, schedule, the system description, the minimum hours a fully charged system can power the indicated circuits, applicable incentives and customer insured costs, and the pay EW9. And once again, the table in the checklist that's linked here outlines all the requirements based on whether you're applying for the residential or the retail program. Next slide, please. So this slide focuses on builder credentials, so trainings that are required. These trainings remain the same as in the previous program manual. There's one that you can just submit the certificate, and then there are 3 that require documentation of 30 hours of advanced energy storage specific training to be submitted in addition. The new thing here is that on a case-by-case basis, we may accept manufacturer trainings as long as you can document 30 hours of energy storage specific training. As an example, we have accepted Tesla manufacturer training as long as the 30 hours of training have been documented. So I believe if we go to the next slide, that wraps out the contractor requirements. So now let's turn our attention to the residential program updates. Next slide, please. So a new thing for the residential program that's beginning in 2026 is the establishment of a quality battery installer designation for our program. So this is analogous to New York Sun's quality solar installer designation, and similarly, it's designed to reward exemplary quality control among residential storage contractors. So the eligibility criteria are pretty similar to the QSI designation that many of you may be familiar with. You have to be an active full status residential storage contractor. You have to complete at least 12 comprehensive projects within the calendar year that's measured. So for the initial designation, we're going to use calendar year 2026. And then you must have at least a 4.0 average in-field inspection QA score for the calendar year. So in this case, 2026, it has to be a 4.0 without rounding up. The designation will be valid for 1 calendar year, and we will re-evaluate annually. So if you end up being qualified as a quality battery installer, NYSERDA will identify you on NYSERDA platforms such as our website. We'll also provide you with a NYSERDA QBI logo so that you can use this in your marketing as a third-party differentiator and validation of the quality of your work. Next slide, please. Another quality assurance update is that our Quality and Market Standards Department has updated the residential storage inspection checklist. It now references the 2023 National Electric Code, the 2025 New York State Fire Code, and the 2025 Residential Code of New York State. These inspection checklists can be found on our website as well under the Quality Assurance Reference Guides drop-down section. So everyone should please note that all residential storage inspections will use this latest inspection checklist moving forward, regardless of the date that the project was permitted. And as always, all projects must comply with state code, local AHJ requirements, and the manufacturer installation instructions. Between these, the most stringent applicable requirements should always be followed. If you have any questions, please feel free to email inspections@nyserda.ny.gov. Next slide, please. So now we're going to get into some review of the dynamic load management or bring your own battery requirement that we detailed in our January webinar dedicated to this topic. We wanted to share with you the most current dates and things you need to know about. So as a quick review, upon installation, residential systems have to have their customers enroll in their utility's DLM or bring your own battery program, except if the utility does not have a program available, or if direct customer participation isn't practicable and an aggregator is not available. So there are a few available programs as of today and programs about to launch. So for National Grid and NYSEG and RG&E, both of these utilities already have bring your own battery programs. And as a result, NYSERDA requires that all applications in these territories submitted after April 1st. So we're already in this time frame now. The customer will need to enroll in the utility BYOB program. For Orange and Rockland, NYSERDA will start requiring these applications to have their customers enroll if you submit after May 1st. For these above utilities, if you're using an energy storage system manufacturer that hasn't been onboarded to the utility program, we have the grace period for onboarding. That's until June 1st, and we will not require customers to enroll in BYOB until that point because it's not practicable. So there's some nuanced information here that I've covered. On the next slide, I've created a visual outline of incentive eligibility, taking into account the application submission date, utility territory, customer enrollment status, and battery onboarding status. So next slide, please. So this visual will be in the slides for your reference after the webinar, but as you can see, it sort of gives you a timeline of what the eligibility is depending on application date, utility territory, etc. So to run through an example here, let's say that you were using a Tesla battery, which is supported by all of the BYOB programs. If your customer is enrolled in their utility BYOB program, then you're eligible and your invoice will be paid. If your customer was not enrolled in their utility BYOB program, again, assuming that you're using this onboarded Tesla battery, if you are in National Grid or NYSEG and RG&E, you would not be eligible for incentive payment until your customer enrolls in the program. However, let's say that you are using an EG4 battery that's not supported by any of the programs yet. You would have until after June 1st. At that point, you would not be eligible for incentive payment until your battery is onboarded to the program and your customer is enrolled. Next slide, please. So the way that we're going to verify customer enrollment is at the invoicing stage of a project. So NYSERDA will validate the project customer's information against enrollment lists that we maintain with the utility through data sharing that we've just established. As you may have noticed that we now collect customer utility account numbers on the residential application that we then share out to each utility to indicate which accounts are enrolled in BYOB. We do this on a roughly weekly basis at this point. So once your project invoices, then if your customer is enrolled as indicated by utility, then we will go ahead and approve your invoice and your incentive will be paid. If your customer is not enrolled, however, then it's subject to whether your battery is onboarded to utility program as to whether the grace period applies or not. Next slide, please. So turning from overview of the BYOB requirement updates to general project application requirements. Again, this is about the documents that you submit with each project. So this includes the assigned project application, 9540 listing, electrical drawing, site photos, etc. Just wanted to call out that for the 9540 equipment listing, UL 1741 is often submitted for this requirement, but it is not acceptable in lieu of 9540. We require to see a UL 9540 certificate, or if your spec sheet says that the product is certified to UL 9540, then we can take that as well. On the electrical drawing, We require all the standard symbols, the quantity, manufacturer, model of the energy storage system, the kilowatt hours, and also the kilowatt power capacity, which I want to flag is typically not equal to the kilowatt hour value. So this is a common error. Finally, the site photos. We'll need to include the wall and ceiling area around the energy storage system, which we review for compliance with fire and building code. And then a last clarification here, our old program manual said that storage manufacturer commissioning was a required document, but it's actually not. You will not need to submit that. Next slide, please. So after you've applied and been approved and payment has been completed, there are QA inspections that happen for each project. So for new contractors to our incentive program that haven't participated in other storage incentives with us, you will usually come into provisional status. And so there's a 100% inspection rate for your first batch of 3 projects that were awarded. If one or more of these do not receive a passing score, then there's another batch of 3 projects that will have a 100% inspection rate. If any of the second batch do not receive a passing score, you may be terminated from the program. But if either your first or second batch of 3 projects all receive a passing score, then you can be placed in full status. So once you are in full status, there is a 10% inspection rate of all of your awarded projects. There is a somewhat accelerated pathway for existing New York Sun contractors in full status if you've participated in the Long Island single-family residential storage incentive that has existed. So if at least 2 Long Island storage projects received a passing score, then we will inspect only 1 additional project for the non-Long Island incentive. And if that additional project receives a passing score, then you will get full status with the residential storage incentive program. Next slide, please. So ending off here with a couple of technical notes on residential system requirements. First off, the CEC equipment listing. So you may have noticed if you are a contractor applying to us that you now need to indicate in the application the manufacturer and model number based on the California Energy Commission energy storage system list, battery list, or grid support battery inverter list. So your battery manufacturer is responsible for keeping themselves updated into the California list, and that is why we have you put that into the application with the drop-down menus. Next slide, please. So a couple notes on round trip efficiency, which we define as the difference between the energy used to charge a system and the energy discharged from the system. We have now set minimums for lithium ion at 85% and vanadium redox flow batteries at 65%. For other technologies, minimum round trip efficiencies will be determined as those products become commercially available. And if any contractors are intending to apply with a project deploying a non-lithium ion technology, we ask that you contact us prior to your application so that we are aware. So I believe that's it. If we go to the next slide, I'll turn it over to John Patinos, who manages the retail storage program.
Thanks a lot, Jasmine. So I'll be talking, as Jasmine did, about updates to the program manual, but as they pertain to the retail energy storage incentive program. Next slide, please. The first update is governed by the first update governs the measurement and verification updates and clarity to the process for the data streaming requirement. So in this new version of the manual, we clarified that after the NYSERDA quality assurance field inspection, but before the measurement and verification discharge test, the contractor is responsible for establishing an automated data transfer to collect interval data. So that's 15-minute data for demand charge installations or hourly interval data for meter compensation installations for charge and discharge of the system for up to 3 hours. So participants in the older vintage of the retail storage incentive program will be familiar with this process, but we've called it out in the new manual. Guidance for this process is found on the New York State Distributed Energy Resources website. Importantly, failure to maintain this data transmittal for the 3-year period may result in a contractor being placed in probation or suspended status. In this section, we also clarified that for front-of-the-meter projects, the discharge test is going to be performed on the high side of the transformer. Another update to the measurement and verification milestone section further down the manual, we clarified that if a project application has an installed capacity that exceeds the incentive cap, which is 20 megawatt hours, the 20 megawatt hours will be used as a benchmark against the discharge test results rather than the incentive capacity that exceeds that cap. I'll go through an example in just a minute. So verified capacity within 5% of the benchmark will result in no change to the incentive in this instance. So for example, if a project applies with 23.5 megawatt hours on record and records a discharge test result of 19.9 megawatt hours, since that 9.9 megawatt hours falls within 5% of the 20 megawatt hour cap, there will be no change in incentive as a result. So we've clarified this in this version of the manual. Next slide, please. We've also shored up some detail on requirements for prevailing wage compliance. So in particular, if the energy storage project is only subject to prevailing wage requirements because of the Retail Energy Storage Incentive Program rules, contractors will not need to obtain a project-specific wage schedule from New York State Department of Labor. Instead, they can use Department of Labor's generic wage schedule for the county in which the project is located. However, if the project will receive or has received a New York Sun incentive award, so it's a paired project, contractors consult the New York Sun program manual prior to the commencement of any construction activities subject to prevailing wage rules. Because New York Sun is the prevailing wage requirements, New York Sun are provided as statutory requirements. And so they're a little bit more rigorous and technical. Contractors advised to consult that manual first. Any non-retail storage questions about prevailing wage requirements should be directed to the Department of Labor. There's contact information provided on this slide. Next slide, please. So we also clarified language around the required certifications that are submitted at the project completion milestone. In particular, there's two sets of required materials that are found on the NYSERDA Energy Storage website. Those are the prevailing wage certification letter templates for contractors and quarterly certifications provided by a New York State licensed CPA or an independent accountant's report. The latter requirement, essentially, contractor must obtain certifications for each eligible project at the end of each calendar quarter during the entirety of the project construction period, and then submit all of these quarterly certifications at the project completion milestone. If the construction period extends beyond the project completion milestone, a contractor has to provide any additional quarterly certifications within 90 days of the completion of construction. Next slide, please. We have also updated the project application requirements section. A new requirement is that projects intending to use equipment associated with a serious thermal incident, such as a fire or explosion, may need to submit a copy of a full root cause analysis, or RCA, conducted in response to the incident, as well as any documented modifications made in response to the incident. So those are at application. We're also collecting new deliverables at the peer review milestone for all eligible projects. Same two deliverables, the full RCA for any serious thermal incidents involving the proposed ESS, and any documentation describing modifications to the ESS as a result. Next slide, please. We've clarified seeker requirements for projects in New York City. So unchanged is that projects in New York City must provide a signed attestation detailing compliance under the City of Yes carbon neutrality zoning amendment regulations. We have clarified that for projects with a gross floor area, which I'll explain in a minute, of 4,000 square feet or greater, NYSERDA will be conducting an independent secret review. This gross floor area is collected on an updated planning and zoning form, another document found on the retail program website, and it's determined by adding up the square footage of all the project's enclosed structures. So any structure that has walls, a roof, and doors. for example, a storage cabinet or a container containing battery banks. Each co-located project owned by the same contractor, the same parcel, will be aggregated in terms of gross floor area by NYSERDA for the purposes of this analysis. And lastly, we clarified that for projects with a gross floor area of 10,000 square feet or greater that are sited in residential districts, also have to provide a seeker negative declaration and may require an independent seeker review by NYSERDA. Next slide, please. We clarified requirements around the coastal zone assessment document that's required in project application. So contractors, we called out specifically the New York State Department of State online GIS tool. That's the Coastal Atlas shown on the right. And if you look at the screenshot on the right, you'll see the following components which are key for approval of this document. The first is the project address. The second is the pin on the map that shows the project's location relative to two map layers. So the review team needs to see the project's location as well as the presence of the map layers. These map layers are the landward coastal area boundary and the communities with local waterfront revitalization programs. And importantly, also the map layer legend should be shown. So screenshot on the right is an exemplar submission of this document. Next slide, please. We've also made a small clarification on the project address update policy for projects in submitted status. Specifically, projects are allowed to update their address in instances where the address for a project changes, but the tax parcel remains the same. So in this instance, the contractor would notify NYSERDA, and NYSERDA would request any documentation supporting this address change. It's important to note, just want to call this out, at project completion, NYSERDA does collect the utility PTO letter, and the address on that document must match the project address on record. Next slide, please. Two new updates pertaining to peer review. The first is language that strongly encourages contractors who are going to be submitting project modifications to do so prior to the peer review process. Otherwise, the contractor may be required to take their project through a second peer review. So to save that time, strongly encourage any project modifications to be submitted prior to peer review. In addition, a new resource is linked on the NYSERDA Energy Storage website, and that is the Energy Storage Peer Review Guidebook. It is a comprehensive walkthrough of peer review and all the deliverables required. Contractors are strongly encouraged to review this document prior to submitting for the peer review milestone. Next slide, please. We also clarified parts of the invoicing and payment process. So in a departure from the older versions of the Retail Energy Storage Incentive Program, once the project has passed all milestones, all quality assurance issues are resolved, and the discharge test is complete, NYSERDA, not the contractor, NYSERDA will generate an invoice for payment to the contractor through the NYSERDA portal, authorizing the full incentive payment. Two callouts that might be helpful for contractors here. In advance of invoicing, contractor may opt in for electronic payments by using the URL on the screen. In addition, before completing this form, contractor should email the energy storage alias, the name, title, email, and phone number of the accounts receivable contact for your firm that can be reached by NYSERDA to confirm the banking information. This should hopefully ensure a smooth payment process. Next slide, please. Two very small updates. In section 3.1, we clarified that run-of-river hydropower could be part of an eligible project type. Energy storage paired with run-of-river hydropower connected directly into the distribution system and compensated under VETR, assuming the project meets all the other requirements outlined for retail storage projects in the manual, would be eligible for this program. Similar to what Jasmine described in the residential program, we have documented round-trip efficiency values for vanadium redox flow at 65%. Next slide, please. I also wanted to run through Some common contractor mistakes. First is uploading proof of wire transfer as the proof of 100% utility interconnection payment. This has been called out in the last version of the program manual, but I really want to underscore it here. Non-utility issued confirmation, like wire transfer documentation, is not acceptable proof of payment. This could cause a project application to be moved out of the current block and moved to unsubmitted status. A contractor will have to reapply at whatever the current incentive rate is under the then current block. The second is emailing requested documents. So if documents are rejected in the Salesforce portal, they should be re-uploaded to the project Salesforce record. This minimizes delays in review. Missing either installed storage capacity in kilowatt hours or total system size in kilowatts on the site plan is often a reason for site plan document to be rejected. I covered what constitutes an incomplete coastal zone assessment form in a previous slide, so I won't go into that here. Another common mistake is not using the planning and zoning form template, another document found on the residential and retail storage incentives website. Lastly, emailing individual project managers instead of using the energy storage alias, energystorage@nycerta.ny.gov. This is monitored by multiple individuals, ensures continuity, better tracking, more efficient way to get a response. Next slide, please. So as mentioned, these slides will be posted to the Residential and Retail Storage Incentive Program website. But here, Jasmine and I have put together a few helpful links, including the link directly to the updated program manual, the utility BYOB web pages, which provide details that will help residential contractors with their submissions, as well as the link to NYSERDA's energy storage mailing list for regular program updates, including updates on program manual rule changes. So with that, I will pass it back to Jasmine to take us through the inclusive storage incentives.
Thanks, John. So I'm back with some updates on the inclusive storage incentives, which I'm very glad to share was launched this Monday afternoon. So that's very exciting. A lot of the following content will be review from our December webinar preparing for the ISI launch, but there are some key updates that I will highlight. Next slide, please. So as a quick review, the ISI, or inclusive storage incentives, are dedicated blocks for higher than market rate incentives for residential and retail on-site energy storage projects that serve disadvantaged communities. They are statewide capacity blocks, so they're not segmented by region. There's one large residential ISI block and one large retail ISI block for the entire state. And to be eligible for this block, a residential or retail project, all the eligibility requirements of the market rate programs that we just described earlier in the presentation, as well as additional eligibility criteria that I'm about to review with you. So one final clarification here is that residential and retail projects can only apply for either the ISI or its market rate equivalent. The ISI and market rate incentives can be stacked. Finally, you can see a graph for each ISI block to monitor in real time on the existing megawatt hour dashboards on our website. There will be a new graph there that you can see now that reflects the amount of projects that has been submitted. So the number may go up or down depending on whether projects move out of submitted into unsubmitted status, but it's just what has been submitted to the program. Next slide, please. So I'm going to take a moment to review the residential eligibility requirements and then also the documentation requirements for the residential ISI specifically, and highlight any new nuances. So for the residential ISI, you need to meet one of 3 eligibility criteria. You don't need to meet all 3, just one of them. So the first one is geographic location in a disadvantaged community, as defined by the Climate Justice Working Group and shown on the map that's linked on this slide. The second eligibility pathway is household income. So if you have a homeowner with documented household income under 80% of area median income or state median income, whichever is higher, or demonstrated participation in a categorical eligibility program as listed in NYSERDA's income eligibility application. The new part here is that if a residential building has more than 1 unit or meter, only the owner-occupied unit or meter is eligible for the ISI. So as an example, if you have a homeowner in a disadvantaged community that owns a duplex and they only live in one of the units, then their unit can qualify for the ISI, but the second unit that they do not occupy would only be eligible for the market rate incentive. Next slide, please. So the last of 3 eligibility pathways for the residential program is affordable housing eligibility. So this is for residential 1 to 4 unit housing properties. So at least 50% of the units have to be under the 80% income thresholds, like we mentioned before, or at least 50% of the units have to demonstrate participation in a categorical eligibility program. So once again, for multi-unit buildings, it doesn't have to be 100%, it just needs to be 50%. Next slide, please. So here's the documentation that's required to demonstrate each of those pathways. So for geographic eligibility, you just need to put in a site address in your application, and the application will automatically check if it's within a disadvantaged community census tract. You do not need to submit any additional documentation, so that makes it easier for you. For the income eligibility pathway, you'll need your customer to apply and be approved for the NYSERDA income eligibility verification application that I mentioned before, and that has been previously used by the Affordable Solar Program for those who are familiar with that program. And then once they're approved, then in our storage application, please include that award letter as one of the required documents. There will be a slot for you to do that. And then for the last pathway for affordable housing, once again, this is most relevant to more than 1 unit residential buildings. You could either submit IEV applications for 50% of the units, or if you're not doing that, then you can include documentation from an eligible affordable housing program in the required documents. So there's a slide, and also the program manual section 3.5.3.1 that shows all of the eligible affordable housing programs. So we'll touch on that later. Next slide, please. So turning our attention to the retail ISI, once again, this differs from the residential ISI in that you need to meet all of 5 criteria, and this applies to affordable housing properties and eligible critical facilities. So the first of 5 criteria is that you need to be located in a disadvantaged community. The second criterion is that you need to serve a nonprofit, public, or affordable housing facility. The third criterion is that it needs to be an actively operating eligible critical facility type, as specifically listed in section 3.2.1 of our manual. Next slide, please. And the last 2 criteria here. Your system needs to be configured behind the meter. This will be expected to be clearly demonstrated by the electrical drawing and attested to via the application portal field. And then you need to be configured to provide backup power to your facility during a grid outage. This should be demonstrated by the electrical drawing, but I'll make an overall note here that the intent of these 2 requirements is to demonstrate that you can feasibly provide backup power to the specific critical facility that you're applying with. So we will take that into account as we review. Next slide, please. So this is the complete list of critical facilities that we covered back in December. The list of facilities is the same, but I'll quickly gloss through the next 5 slides. So starting here, multifamily housing, emergency medical care facilities, and hospitals and related facilities are included. Next slide, please. We also include outpatient facilities of various types, pharmacies, home care, emergency services, and public water utility buildings. Next slide, please. We include various educational facilities and community centers. Next slide, please. We include facilities that provide other key social services that are not medical care, including childcare, daycare for individuals with disabilities or access and functional needs, food assistance, etc. Next slide, please. And then finally, facilities providing other non-critical essential social services, such as houses of worship, libraries, senior citizen centers, along with jails, correctional facilities, detention facilities, and then other facilities used in emergency response, such as cooling shelters. One note here is that any admin and support facilities that are key to the provision of a critical service are eligible facilities. So for example, if you have a hospital and there's administrative office space, then we could consider that as well. Next slide, please. So that was all the eligibility requirements. The documentation that you need to demonstrate these pathways is outlined here. So firstly, you'll need to submit proof of nonprofit, public, or affordable housing facility status. Secondly, you'll need to submit actively operating critical facility status as demonstrated by 12 previous months of utility bills. So the 12 previous months of utility bills are already required for any on-site retail application. However, for the ISI, we will specifically check that the name and address on said utility bills correspond to an eligible critical facility type, as we just mentioned. If the facility type is not self-evident from what the name and address is, then we may request that you submit evidence of that facility's designation by a relevant government entity. So for example, a letter from the relevant local government or a listing in a statewide government database. And then finally, we will also require that you submit the customer agreement. This has to be an executed customer agreement. You are only able to submit sample or draft customer agreements as part of your contractor application, but by the time you submit a project application, that customer agreement needs to be executed. Next slide, please. So as mentioned before, this is the list of eligible housing programs that we would accept for either the retail ISI or as documentation for the residential ISI. So at a high level, this includes U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, U.S. Department of Agriculture, New York State HCR, low-income housing tax credits provided to housing, New York City HPD, State of New York Mortgage Agency, New York City Department of Homeless Services, New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, New York State Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance, and finally, New York State Office of Mental Health provided housing. And final caveat to all of the above that I explained, the program manual includes the complete eligibility requirements, so we remind you to reference the program manual itself for the most authoritative information. So that concludes the ISI-related section. Next slide, please. I'll turn it back over to our director, Shyam, for question and answer.
Thanks, Jasmine. Thanks, John, for going over these updates. So not seeing too many questions. So I think we will probably be able to give folks some time back. Maybe we'll get more as I'm running through, but let's just start by going down the list. So the first question that we got was when it comes to project references for the contractor application process. The question is, do the references need to be unique? Do we need 3 different people for each of the 3 unique projects, thereby making a total of 9 people? So the answer is no. It's just 1 person or 1 reference per project. So ultimately it would be 3 different individuals, 1 per project. Second question is, will existing or pending retail applications be notified of the new requirements? So most of the updates that we've gone through today do not apply to already awarded projects. In fact, I'm not sure if any really do in terms of new rules or requirements. There are a couple of new process changes or clarification of process changes. It's probably more accurate to say. In the event that they ever do, I would say that this webinar and the announcement of the updated manual via our stakeholder mailing list serves as notification, but we also clarify any changes in the process or updates if required with specific projects via the Salesforce application portal post award. So there is generally a back and forth between the applicant and our program team with regard to post award milestones and deliverables that are clarified through the portal. Next question is, does the gross floor area definition include transformers? So the gross floor area definition doesn't apply to specific equipment, as John mentioned during his remarks. It applies to enclosed structures that house equipment. So the question, when it comes to any specific piece of equipment, is more about the enclosed structure that's housing that equipment. And again, the general criteria are: is it an enclosed structure? Does it have a roof, walls, doors? If so, it is an enclosed structure and should be included in the GFA, in the aggregate GFA for the project. Next question, could you please clarify the 85% round trip efficiency requirement for lithium ion systems? Is it required at the start of operations or maintained over the project life? So the answer there is the 85% RT requirement is specific to the start of operations as listed on the manufacturer's spec sheet or data sheet for the product. Next question. Can you talk about the ability to stack services with non-wires alternative programs under the ISI retail program? So the ISI retail program is really intended specifically for behind the meter storage that is serving a customer site, right? And so when one would think that the intersection between the apply to or be awarded under utility NWA program and the ISA retail portfolio would be a null set, because typically NWA projects, not just typically, until now it has always been the case that NWA projects have been front of the meter projects that can inject into the grid when required. But as such, in the event that this does take place, if a utility were to procure a behind the meter project for an NWA solicitation, there is nothing in the program rules that prevents that same project from being awarded an inclusive storage incentive. We did have rules relating to NWA eligibility that concern projects that would have previously been awarded NWAs that could then not, after being awarded an NWA or being in negotiation for a pending NWA award, would not be eligible for retail incentives. But that is not the case at this time. But again, if there's something we're missing, then it would be worth just checking with us via the energy storage inbox, because I don't see this happening in practice. I don't see an ISI retail project, based on its behind the meter on-site service configuration being really relevant to an NWA program or solicitation. Next question, is there a maximum energy storage system size for the retail ISI? It is the same as is the case for our market retail program, which is 5 megawatts in terms of power capacity and 20 megawatt hours in terms of energy capacity. The expectation, again, is because this is really meant for behind the meter projects that are on site. It would be unlikely that we would be awarding or even receiving applications from projects that are that large. But again, it's the size limitation is agnostic between the market rate program and the retail ISI incentive program. The next question is, are there any comments pending updates to the bulk program and keeping it in sync with these updates? So the answer there is no. The residential retail programs and the bulk programs are structured completely differently. They are administered by different NYSERDA teams. The bulk storage program is administered by administered under NYSERDA's large-scale renewables team, or large-scale resources team, I should say, whereas the residential retail programs are managed by NYSERDA's integrated energy solutions program teams. So they are completely different programs and are not aligned with each other in terms of any sort of update sync cadence. Next question, is the ISI available in Long Island? So at this time, retail incentives in general and the ISI specifically is not available to Long Island residents or projects based out of Long Island, given that LIPA's participation in cost recovery for the residential and retail program incentives is still to be determined. LIPA has committed up to a sum of $4 million so far for cost recovery, which does not enable us to launch a LIPA specific program. So that is still to be determined at this time. And as of this time, the ISI incentives are available for all other utility territories except for Long Island. I will say that actually one thing to clarify is on the residential side, we do have a version of the ISI essentially in place. So the Long Island Solar Plus Storage residential incentive that supports residential energy storage that's paired with solar is still available for Long Island residents. And that there is and so the base rate for that for quite some time has been $250 per kilowatt hour. There is an additional incentive of $150 per kilowatt on top of that $250 per kilowatt base, so i.e. $400 per kilowatt hour incentive for projects that are cited at low and moderate income households. So that is available at this time, as well as the base incentive. So when I talked about the lack of availability for the ISI in Long Island, it's really more pertinent to the retail ISI. And again, that is still something that is being worked through with LIPA. Next question is, does the retail ISI require the energy storage system to be listed to the CEC? So at this time, no. At this time, the CEC listing is only currently a requirement for the residential program and not for the retail program in any way, including the ISI version of the retail incentive. So it looks like we've gone through all of the questions that have been submitted so far. So at this point in time, I think maybe just giving us another couple of seconds to see if we're getting any more questions through the Slido feature. So please bear with us. Nope, I'm not seeing any additional questions this time. So I think we can conclude this webinar earlier than we had imagined. Again, if there's any additional questions that come up, would encourage you to reach out to the team via our inbox email, which is energystorage@nisrda.ny.gov. I would also strongly encourage, if you've not already signed up to the NYSERDA Energy Storage mailing list, that you do so, because there will be updates that will be issued in the future as the program continues operating, whether it's new incentive blocks and rates, whether it's any modifications in existing rules, whether it's new incentives. The best way to stay abreast of all of these developments is to be signed up to our mailing list to receive all the relevant notifications there. So with that, thank you all for making the time to attend this webinar. Hopefully you found it productive. I would again encourage folks to do a thorough read of the program manual in relation to the updates we talked about today, and reach out if there's any questions to the team. So thank you again, Jasmine and John, and all of you in the audience for attending, and have a good rest of your day.